Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Ark, where we learn more about the people of Holy Trinity Cathedral. We hope you have had a fruitful and meaningful beginning of Great Lent, as we are now on the second Sunday of Great Lent. And we pray that as we go forward through this journey, that you might find peace and joy as we journey towards Pascha. On today's show, we have someone who has a really interesting story, someone who has played a very large part in the cultural ministry here at the cathedral, and who has cultivated the sense of love for our homeland and for the ethnic culture traditions that we have as part of being Greek, and especially being Greek Americans. And her family has been a very long and lasting part of this fabric that is the Greek American community here in Charlotte, and especially here at Holy Trinity. So with that, we're fortunate to welcome our guest for today, Miss Stacie Peroulas. Stacie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, John, and for the very generous introduction.
Of course, of course. So talk about your childhood, talk about growing up, where that happened, who that happened with, and how the faith was part of your childhood.
Sure. So I was born in Newport News, Virginia, in the Tidewater area, and my parents, my dad had come from Cyprus when he was a teenager, and he had his parents, and my grandparents came after him, so they lived close by, and my mom was also born in that area, and so they were already sort of very entrenched in Newport News, which was a really tight-knit but small community compared to what we have here at Holy Trinity. So I grew up in Saints Constantine and Helen in the church there, and did what probably most Greek American kids were doing those days. We went to Sunday school and Greek school, and around age 6, I think we started dancing for our church festival, which again I think is a kind of a typical story. So I have my one younger sister, Marina, who now lives here in Charlotte as well, and so we had just a really tight-knit group of, luckily, family, a lot of first cousins around us. My parents' siblings all ended up settling in the same place, and a really strong church community. Again, much smaller than what we have here. I always marvel at the fact that there's so many kids here, and really in some cases the kids only get to know their grade level really well. But for us it was, everyone from little kids up through high school. We were all sort of one big group of friends, and we got to know each other very well and have endured as very big parts of each other's lives through the years.
Yeah. I always love to hear what people talk about growing up at these smaller communities, and maybe after college they find their permanent homes and they make their families and they are involved in these larger communities, and the dynamics are so different, and it's so interesting to hear the different stories and the different experiences going from one size parish to another. So you grew up in Virginia. Did you go to school in Virginia as well?
I did. I went to the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Wahoo. Didn't do so great in the tournament this year, but we're gonna look again at next year. Yes, UVA was a great experience, and I did get to attend with some of my friends from home. Actually, my Greek American friends. Actually taught a little bit of dance while I was at UVA and was part of the Hellenic Society there, and went to the church there in Charlottesville, which was a nice way to stay connected. And after graduating from UVA, I ended up in New York for several years working, and I was in 2 different areas of New York, in Brooklyn and then in Astoria, Queens later on, and was fortunate to have a lot of culture around me during that time as well. And then ended up in Charlotte several years later when I married my husband, Dean, which we're coming up on 20 years, actually, in the fall. So it's kind of amazing to think. And when you look back, so much has happened.
Sure.
We have 3 kids. We have one that's almost graduating high school. So it's time, but at the same time, it's, as everyone says, it's a flash.
Right. So talk about moving from Newport News to Charlottesville, to finding yourself in big ol' New York, and what that experience was like.
So it's funny, my decision making was very early and quick. So in 5th grade, I visited UVA for the first time, and I told my parents, I'm definitely going here. I know where I want to go to college, and I applied to one place, and that's where I went. when I was in 8th grade, I visited New York for the first time on a school trip, and I wrote a little letter to my mom on stationery from the Milford Plaza Hotel that my mom still has. It says, I love New York, I'm gonna move here one day. And so I applied for jobs in New York, and it never disappointed me. It was an incredible experience. I moved alone, I lived alone, made incredible friends, had great work experiences. I'm very, very grateful that I had that. And to be honest, when Dean and I met, which was at an AHEPA convention actually in New Orleans, he was already living in Charlotte, even though he grew up in Roanoke. But when I met him, and I was so ready to marry him, and I've told him this to his face and around him many times, so it's not a surprise story, but I was very ready to marry him, but not really ready to leave New York. I was really sad because it was a part of me that I'd always wanted. But again, grateful it happened. So when I moved to Charlotte, I was still relatively young. I was just in my mid-20s, had been really plucked out of a big city and into Charlotte, which 20 years ago looked a lot different than it does now. I mean, Charlotte's an incredible place and has grown so much, but it was much quieter, and I didn't have that network quite yet. So it was a bit of a transition. But as with every move I've made, the church was always central. I mean, I always looked for that community, as many people do, to sort of have that built-in family. And I'll say, I saw my kubata, Georgia, this morning, Hericus, at church this morning, but her family, one of the first social events that I went to when I moved here was the engagement party of Georgia and Andre Hericus. They were engaged and married the same year as us. And her family, who are now our kubati, they baptized our Yani. It was the first time I got excited about moving here, was meeting all of them, because they were just so incredible to me and welcomed me. And so I've always been grateful to their family.
Yeah. Georgia, shout out 2 months in a row, 2 episodes in a row on the Ark.
Oh, see, you better get Georgia up here. I'm going to encourage her. Georgia, you're next.
Exactly.
You're next.
It didn't come from me, Georgia. So you're living in New York, and what field of work were you doing?
So I worked for an accounting firm, KPMG. I was in tax accounting.
Very nice.
Very exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. KPMG is a great company.
Yeah.
So you're dating Dean at the time. Also shout out AHEPA, who, as we know, have brought together many wonderful couples in the church. And you talked about knowing you wanted to marry him, but you weren't ready to move to Charlotte. So before meeting Georgia and her family, what internally were you going through trying to decide, is this move to Charlotte really what I need to do?
It was never a question of if. I knew I wanted to, marrying Dean was the easiest choice. I've never even for a hot second regretted it. I mean, it was very easy to say I was going to marry him and move. It was more just about being melancholy about leaving and not feeling quite like I had potentially, or maybe, I don't think I had major goals of what I wanted to accomplish there, but it was just, it was the classic leaving on a high. I mean, maybe it was better that way. Maybe it was before I got jaded by the city, or because it can be exhausting and expensive and difficult for a single person, and I'm confident that I wouldn't have wanted to raise a family there, so the timing was right. So I can't say that it was a hard decision. It was just a little bit sad. But that I quickly really got entrenched here, and Dean's family, lived here already. His 2 wonderful sisters and his parents, and so it was, I was fortunate to have a good network. And really, we got pregnant pretty quickly with Caterina. So within a year or 2, I had a child, and that brings with it a lot of extra community, and you start to get more entrenched pretty fast.
Sure, absolutely. So what would your advice be to someone who perhaps is single, living somewhere else, and they're moving to Charlotte, or they're moving to a city where there might be a Greek community, there might be a church community, but they might not know a lot of people? What would your advice be to that person to help with that matriculation?
These days, it's so different than it was for me. These days, you just have to get on Facebook, and you probably have 5 mutual friends that know someone in the new community you're going to. And it's interesting because in the work that I do on the Hellenic Dance Festival side of dance. I work with dance directors in different communities, and one thing that I find all the time are these connections. I mean, we've all experienced it. You know, the degree of separation between the Greek Americans and Greeks in general is you know, 1-2 people, and you found a connection. So yeah, I think if you don't feel comfortable just walking in a church and meeting someone in coffee hour, I think you get on a Facebook group, or there's just, people are so welcoming these days and so willing to make those connections. I mean, you know, here in Charlotte, if someone's coming into Charlotte, just reach out to Father V. He's going to put you in contact with exactly who you need to meet. Yeah. So yeah, there's just so many resources, especially social media these days.
Absolutely. So you mentioned you did a little dance instructing while you were at school at UVA in Charlottesville. How quickly after you moved down to Charlotte did you get involved with our dance program here, and kind of talk about where that's gone?
Yeah, so it was probably a year after I moved. Let me think about the timeline a little bit. Yeah, it was more than likely a year. Yes, it was, because I was pregnant with Katerina, and Dean's first cousin, Maria Peroulas, she was Maria Peroulas then, was a Greek school teacher, and she knew that I had some background in dance, and she asked if I would help her teach some kids from the Greek school. And so I helped her with that, and then it's like, you know, you put one foot in and then the church pulls you in the rest of the way. So, and I'm grateful for it, because I would have wanted to be involved anyway. It was always a big part of my life. And I was, you know, had danced with the adult group from my hometown even after moving away. So, yeah, so I helped Maria with that. And then after that, if I'm not wrong, I think it was Johnny Orgopoulos was still the youth director then, or I think he was at that time. And then I started sort of helping him organize for the Greek dance for the festival. And then I went from there.
So,
and I think there were about I want to say there were about 90 to 100 kids involved at that point.
90 to 100. And what year was that?
That would have been 2002.
Okay, so a few kids later, several years later, why don't you talk about your involvement now with the dance program, and how your initial first foot in became, you know, what you do for the program now?
You know, it's evolved so much, and I think through a bit of just, you know, the way things go, my arrival in Charlotte coincided also with the establishment of the Hellenic Dance Festival. So in 2004, Charlotte hosted HDF, which anyone who knows HDF now sees it at convention centers with thousands of people. But that weekend, for those that remember and maybe those that weren't here, was fully happened in our gym the entire weekend. There were 17 teams. We had opening ceremonies Friday night. We had competition all on the floor of the Father C Hall. Dinners, all the food was made by volunteers from Holy Trinity. I mean, the community took such pride in it. And that was the first time that I really planned an event here. And I have to give my gratitude to Christine Kopsis, Frula Kushel, Helen Laronis. We were the host committee that year, the four of us. And they were so wonderful to me, and they really helped mentor me into this community, and were just so much fun to work with. And we pulled off something that was really special. I mean, my Katerina at that time was a baby, an infant, and you know, this is held true for all of my kids. I remember that weekend was so busy. I mean, we were just running ragged, and it was exciting, but it was so much going on. And I mean, Katerina, again, being a baby, not even a year old, I never saw her that weekend. It was like she was in the arms of Holy Trinity. And I remember a girl from Newport News, some of my friends had come down for the weekend, and I remember her coming to me and saying, "Stacie, I was just in the bathroom. Someone is changing Katerina's diaper. I've never seen the lady before." She's like, I felt like I needed to snatch her back. But you know, it's just, we don't live in villages, but this is our village, and it's always just warmed my heart that I know that there is a safe place for them. And that's kind of going off on a tangent a little bit, but anyway, that weekend was really special for us and really, I think, kick-started the growth of our program because it was something really special and really different. It was highlighting dance in a way that had never been highlighted for this community and really for a lot of communities at that time. And so, yeah, from there we really, things started to grow. And so that's when, you know, the festival started to evolve, or the festival program in terms of dance. We made a board. We started looking at grade level curriculum, which has evolved over the years. So now, you know, if you are part of our dance program, starting in kindergarten and through 12th grade, and you know this, John, because you've taught with us, there's a curriculum in place. So you're going to learn, if you are a part of the program for all of those years, or a child is, you are hopefully being exposed to different areas of Greece, different styles of dancing. The history that goes along with it is what we try to fit in there a little bit too. So, yeah, I mean, all of that is, over the years, has evolved, and now we have incredible resources in the form of people who have come to do workshops. We have resources in terms of our own stores of music and videos and costuming. I mean, again, Christine took the helm early on. It's been carried over now with Elaine Maharis and her crew. I mean, all the crew of women who sew, and I mean, it's just such a community effort, and so many talents are just lovingly put to work. I hope it's something that we can just keep pushing forward. It's been missing from us this past year a lot. So yeah, and I think, and then I can keep going. You can. Okay. So
guys, it's a beautiful program.
This is what you meant, right? So yeah, I mean, and for me, talking to or teaching early on for festival, of course, but then teaching separately for HDF, so competitive groups, which, you know, is a very different thing. And now our program is split into those two different programs with a slightly different focus throughout the year. But, you know, now I've been here long enough to have taught little kids who have grown and who are teaching themselves, teaching other groups themselves, who have taught me. Sarado comes to mind, and he was my student. He has now been my teacher. His wife now, who they, you know, met through the church dance realm, and his wife teaches with me. So it's just the connections grow and multiply, and it's a really beautiful thing. So yeah, and we hosted again in 2015 at a much bigger, on a much bigger stage, downtown Charlotte, and it's the program has just continued to grow from there. So over the years, in addition to my work at Holy Trinity, I've also helped at the metropolis level in many different roles, whether it's been host committee. I've been on FIT in different roles since 2017. 2017 is when I took on the director of competition role for HDF, which I'm still doing that. So that entails, as I mentioned earlier, working with the directors from different programs, which I love because I get to know directors and understand their programs and try to help them through as much as I can, not really personally, but more through those connections and connecting people that can, that have resources that fill in the blanks where people maybe have need. So it's been super fun for me, and hope to get back to it. I mean, really, it looks like 2022 HDF will happen. So, and we're gearing up here to get registration going and get these kids dancing again, and hopefully not miss another year.
So you mentioned when you first started with the program here at Holy Trinity, you had, 90 to 100 kids? So for our viewers at home that don't know to the extent of which the program has grown, can you give some people kind of a run through of the numbers and what we offer as far as the festival side of the program is also the numbers for our competition side?
Sure, yes. So we have now grown at last count, so our last registration, which was right before COVID, if you include from our kindergarten up through our adult group that you took the helm on a couple years ago, we're just shy of 400, or right at about 400 participants, which really does put us at the largest church-affiliated dance program in the U.S., which is pretty incredible. And has everything to do with Charlotte, being just an incredibly vibrant city, the church leadership doing such a wonderful job of prioritizing these youth programs and our culture in addition to our faith. And so we're just incredibly fortunate, and the excitement, and I think HDF helps. I think HDF drives that excitement, and that willingness for people to put in the time and effort. So we have, that number 400 includes everybody that participates in the festival. We actually call that our exhibition program because it's primarily festival, but it also includes community performances, and really just for us, it's also about the education. It is, yes, we're preparing for the festival, but it's really just getting them ready, or getting them entrenched and understanding the dances from the curriculum side. And then of those 400, about 100 or so are competitive dancers. So they do festival or the exhibition side as well, but then they're also preparing from September to January to participate in the Hellenic Dance Festival. So the exhibition side, we register in the spring, and we practice June, take off in July, back in August, and then typically on a good year, hopefully this year will be one of them, we'll perform for the festival in September. So usually that's 10 classes once per week on those months, and then right after the festival's over, the week following, we're right back at it, and we're going straight into Hellenic Dance Festival practices, and it's, you know how that is. It's you don't look back once those days hit.
No, that's for sure. So now that people understand how many participants are on the exhibition side of the program, because I know we have people in our community who are watching, but also people outside of the community who know about the Yasu Festival and the presence that it has, not just as a festival in this community, but as a festival that kind of takes precedent as far as the size of other festivals in the metropolis and in the country. How many dance groups do we have at the festival?
So it's a great question. We have one dance group per grade level. So technically it's 13, so grades 1 through 12 plus kindergarten. A couple of those groups are so large, so the kids that are in 7th grade now, that class has just always been enormous, and we have to split them into 2 groups. There's been usually like 45 kids signed up for that one grade level, which again is incredible to me because, again, growing up in Newport News, we had grade 6 through grade 12, and there were probably 12 of us total. So again, just the numbers are amazing. So yes, we have those 13 groups, and any given year, we're probably looking at 30 to 35 volunteer teachers to teach all those classes, which again is a labor of love, and people give of their time and efforts so generously during that time. And then add on to that the adult group, which was Trilos back in the day. This was the group that Sarado had created, and now you and Chloe sort of took on Genesis, which was great, and so I hope that'll continue.
No pressure or anything.
No pressure.
I think you mentioned the dynamic of the size of the group when you were in Newport News. And I remember as a kid, because our festival was in the fall, my sister and I would always go and dance with the dance group at St. Barbara in Durham because they had a spring festival. So we would go, a few Sundays a month, but there was one dance group. Right. And they were lucky if there were 12, which then if you take Marissa and I away, that's 10. And then we had cousins from Mooresville that would come, so that's less. So when people ask me, especially during the summertime when I'm busy teaching, getting ready for the festival, they go, how many kids do you have? Oh, we've got 25, whatever. And they go, what grades are you teaching? I would respond, I have 1 grade. Mm-hmm. And their jaws would hit the floor. Yeah. And it's truly a remarkable thing to have not just a grade per, or a group per grade, but the amount of kids, like you were saying, in each of the grades, which is a beautiful thing that you were mentioning before, that these kids are so close with their fellow classmates and dancers in their grade, right. Which is a really cool thing, and something that I marvel at all the time, how close our kids are, because like you said, for those continuing to competition, there's no break. So
That's
these
right.
kids are together, hopefully on Sundays, but then during the week, beginning in June, all the way through January, just doing dancing.
It's amazing.
And then, we can talk about sports and everything else later in Goya and whatnot, but and joy and hope. But I mean, really from kindergarten up through adults,
Yeah.
there's a bond that I think has a lot to do with dance that I think can't be compared to other communities, and it's a blessing that we've got.
No, I think we sometimes, the people that have been here for a long time, including myself, we lose sight of the fact of, or we lose sight of how unique it is. It is quite unique in across the country, quite frankly. It's presented its own challenges with COVID because there are communities that are smaller that have been able to get back to it a little quicker. For us, it's a feat of logistics because obviously you can't put, I would say the average number in each grade level is probably 24-ish at least. A lot of groups push over 30. So, we have to think about that. How do we bring those kids back safely and with the protocols in place? It's been a little harder to wrap our brains around. But I sat down with Father Christian last week, and I think we got a good plan in place. And some people may choose not to right now, and that's fine too. But slowly, I think we just need to get back at it.
Absolutely. I know I've missed it, and I know, like you mentioned before, seeing the kids grow up and seeing kids that I started teaching when they were, 10 years old, your son included, who's now taller than me.
Yeah.
It's like you see life kind of flash before your eyes. It's like, I want to get back to that, because it really is something that, one, the community should be proud of, but something that really is community-oriented. Yeah. Because, like you said, we've got kids from all ages. We've got adults who are involved, parents who are involved with costumes and other logistical aspects of the program. And I think it really is a gem of this community that's not only appreciated by this community and other communities in our metropolis and in the country, but something that the Charlotte community has really taken a liking to. And people who, especially with the festival, will come multiple days just to see the kids and kids, their friends and their teachers, who are waiting, for that first week of school so they can get their Yasu Festival tickets to come see our kids present really traditional dances. And that's what I wanted to bring up next. You talked about the curriculum and how for those who begin in kindergarten and go all the way through their senior year of high school, covering different areas of Greece with their dances and the history behind the dances and the culture and the traditions of the costuming and everything. Why is that important to you? Because we know there are many different ways that we can present the Greek heritage through dance that other communities might do. But why is it so important that we go into the history of these areas of Greece, these villages that some people might not even know about exist? Right. And somehow here at 600 East Boulevard, we're representing them and generations of history.
Yeah, I think we've learned so much over the years. A generation ago, I think Zorba was probably what most people thought of when it came to Greek dance, and that was the sort of mainstream. If you said Greek dance, that's probably what most people would think about. And so we've just been really fortunate over the years, and I think probably social media again, just like the way the world has gotten smaller and that we've had more access to people abroad in the form of workshops and just material sharing. So we've just amassed so much information. And then we've had people like Sarado, like Stavro, who, people who have from here actually gone and done their own, firsthand research and brought it back to us. So, here we are, we have the gift of all of that. And it's our responsibility, in my opinion, to share that and hold on to it the best we can. We talk a lot about authenticity, and we have these competitions, and their kids are judged, and okay, that's fine, and it is helpful, and it does help grow programs, and it helps people get excited. But the truth is that it evolves all the time. Dance and all of those traditions are still there. people are the ones driving them, so they still move and change. So we do our best. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but as long as we can give exposure, and Greece is a small country, but one that is so rich in many different stories, because it's so old, because it's been through so much, because the terrain is what it is, and because little pockets of culture developed in their own individual ways. So there's different costuming and different music, and the dances are different. And so, it's just a matter of being able to expose the kids. We're not going to be able to teach them everything, but if most of them can come away with an understanding of those differences and appreciation for them, and maybe if a few of them want to move on and take it to the next generation in the form of teaching or learning more even, or going to Greece and entrenching themselves, then to me that's the legacy, and that's hopefully what's going to happen. I mean, you brought up again about the people that grew up here and are giving back. I did the numbers once not too long ago, and there were 75% of our current teachers did grow up here in the program. So it's working in that way, and I just, with this little blip in history of COVID, I really want to get that excitement back, because, in a good way, this has been a time for people to focus, on themselves, and we're talking a lot about the beauty of dance and how wonderful it is, but it's hard, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and Charlotte's not an easy city to drive around, so, it's effort, and it can be frustrating sometimes, and so it's understandable that people want to maybe take a step back and focus on other things, but I'm hopeful that we can get the ball rolling again. It's important.
Yeah. Absolutely. The 75% statistic is interesting.
It was compelling, right? I thought it was excited.
It's a beautiful thing. And it also shows that, what we're doing is working.
Mm-hmm.
That there is this interest, there is this appreciation of what the program is teaching, so that not only are we supporting the program, but we're supporting and understanding and appreciating our heritage and the history that comes with it. And the history that is always going to be presented with an opportunity to learn, because there's so much, like you said, there's so much pockets of history in Greece, just when it comes to dancing and how people celebrate, and I always love talking to my students about this, how a lot of these celebrations and the dances that come from the celebrations, so many of them are like faith oriented. Like, when we're celebrating a feast, or we're celebrating a wedding, or we're turning to the church because there's something bad, or there's a war going on, and dances that come from that. And it's a beautiful thing that the vast majority of our instructors are people who went through the program themselves. Obviously a very different program, just 15, 20 years ago. But I know, especially for me, I don't know how, somehow Georgia Hericus is getting another shout out. Georgia Hericus was my sister's instructor way back in the day. And then she and I eventually, along with Renee Tsifrikas, began teaching together. So you said it perfectly. There's just 1 to 2 degrees separation when it comes to Greeks knowing each other and that connectivity. What has been, I want to get to HDF more in a second, but what has been the most gratifying reward of being involved with the dance program here at Holy Trinity?
Oh, I mean, I would have to say that that gratification comes from the relationships and the joy, and the relationships that I make, but also watching the relationships of the kids. So now my own children have, the oldest has pretty much completed the cycle, if you want to say, in terms of the youth program part of it. She's been involved since she was in kindergarten, is about to graduate high school, and I see how the strength of the relationship she has with her Greek friends in general, but those that she's danced with, and especially those that she's gone to competition with, it's so special. So for me to see that and to know that what we've created has allowed that to happen, or has fostered that, what more could you ask for, honestly? Right. It's keeping these kids close to each other, it's keeping them close to the church, so.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing, and another reason why I hope to get back to it as soon as possible, because we see these relationships formed between the dancers and the students And it does bring a lot of joy to the instructors to know that, like we talked about earlier, what we're presenting and what we're offering and what we're doing is sticking with them in many more ways than just, where you put your right foot and whether we're in a W in armholes,
I've relaxed a lot over the years. I mean, I think I got caught up in those details so much early on, and now it's like, okay, you can take a step back and really understand what the meaning of it is and what the point really is.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we took this last year off from the Hellenic Dance Festival, which for those of you who don't know what HDF is, I don't know where you've been, but it's a shining gem of our metropolis. It's the Hellenic Dance Festival that was really like the brainchild, would you say, of the Metropolitan who wanted something to celebrate our heritage, but to bring people together in this way. Where do you see HDF going in the next 10 years, as you've seen it grow since 2004, through the years, through different cities, through involvement from groups outside of our metropolis? Where do you see the direction going as it evolves?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think that if we continue on the trajectory that we're on, let's just forget COVID for a second. I think it's going to continue to grow. I mean, one thing, and you alluded to it just now, the phenomenon that was sort of unexpected was just this involvement from outside of our metropolis. I mean, last event in 2020, which we did squeak in right before everything changed, we welcomed groups from Denver and Kansas and California, and so clearly way outside of the Atlanta metropolis, but it was really wonderful to see that. Brought a different flavor and different faces and expanded that network, which was really wonderful. So I think that'll continue. One thing that actually grew out of the pandemic year was the HDF Forum series, which again kind of was a positive that grew out of that quiet space of not teaching all the time, running around and doing the typical dance calendar year, something that we had talked about, and we did have an HDF forum here during our Onyxy workshop weekend live. It was just sort of a one-time event where we had a Q&A with judges and people that were involved in HDF, and it was really great. But it was like March of last year, I was sitting at home thinking, okay, whoa, everyone was getting into Zoom and this whole thing, and so the HDF Forum series became a thing, and that now has allowed us to focus on the educational side of HDF, really educating directors, not just direct education with information, but really opening their eyes to the resources that are out there, because sometimes, especially for programs that aren't well established or just starting out, it's very intimidating to just jump into HDF, and it's like, where do I even begin? So this allows us to use the great network of people that we've been able to establish and to say, hey, let's connect you. If you need costumes or you need materials or you need someone to come to do a workshop, let's just break down all those barriers and kind of help you along. And again, for me, being in my role where I get to work with directors all the time, I can see where some of those holes are. Not always, but just because I'm in conversations a lot. And so it's been really satisfying. And I hope that we can, when everything gets back to normal, maybe it won't be as easy, but I think we'll keep those forum series events in place to supplement the HDF weekend, because HDF weekend's great, but it's a zoo, and it's hard to do everything. So this allows us to do things throughout the year to support those efforts.
Can you talk about some of the gatherings you've had and the topics, and maybe if there are potentially any more plans for the rest of the year?
Sure. So our first one was more of a historical piece. I thought it was a really nice introduction for people just to understand what we're doing. We got to introduce our program. We welcomed 2 presenters from Greece, Irene Lutsaki, who was an incredible woman who I was fortunate enough to meet when I was in Greece last year, and Christos Papakostas, who's been here before to teach many times, a great friend of our program in Charlotte, but also to HDF in general. So they were the first official presenters, and it was really wonderful. After that, we did a music centric session, which was super. We had a presenter from Crete on, along with a couple of presenters, Bobby from Virginia, and that was really nice. We did an actual presentation. Saraldo also presented on that one about the music of Thraiki, and then we did a Q&A and Desi with some of the musicians that come to HDF regularly. And then we just now in February did a costume-centric one. Again, we had a presenter from Greece on, and then a Q&A with some costume judges, and that was great. So yes, those have been super and well received and well attended. And then and those are open to anyone. It doesn't have to be just to people in the HDF realm. Anyone can be part of that. And then we are planning another one, hopefully for next month, TBD, but on the date, but it should be coming very soon. And that is going to be, now that Pascha's coming, and of course right after that, what happens? It's weddings and it's celebrations, and hopefully in the summer, Panigria and all these good things. So we're gonna do an event on dance etiquette. Those little nuanced things that sometimes get lost in the shuffle. And so we're really looking forward to that, so stay tuned.
So what you're saying is I will finally be able to direct people and say, going to the front of the line immediately is not proper dance etiquette.
Yes, I mean, listen, we don't want to squash enthusiasm. Let's not squash enthusiasm. However, if Mr. Nixon's at the front of the line doing Tsamiko, don't go to the front. You leave him there and you enjoy it, and it's a gift to be able to watch it, actually. So
yeah, shout out Tom and Laura.
Yes,
that should be the first rule that we talk about at dance etiquette.
Right.
That's wonderful. And I know you had talked about the educational aspect that we're trying to impart on everyone involved, so that obviously we want to keep and cherish the traditions, but we want to continue to grow and learn. So that's a wonderful thing, and kind of part of that silver lining of this time, that we were able to find different ways to still keep in contact and still find ways to be involved in ways perhaps we hadn't thought about before. And I hope that it does continue, because it's always great to, like you said before, break down the barriers of this group versus this group versus this group, because it's a competition. But at the end of the day, it's all about our one heritage and how it looks for different people in different parts of Greece, and learning together, because the more we can learn together, I think strengthens the diaspora and strengthens what it means to be a Greek American, especially within the dance world.
Absolutely.
So, moving back locally, what is one thing since coming to Holy Trinity, and obviously you've been here several years now, what is one thing that maybe was here or was part of the culture of Holy Trinity when you first moved here, and what is one thing that has changed, we'll say for the better, one thing that has evolved now in 2021, aside from COVID?
The first part of the question was what was in place then?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think, again, one thing, and I didn't notice it so much as being special when I moved here, because I came from New York, which was so entrenched culturally, and so many recent immigrants living there, and so moving to Charlotte, it wasn't like, oh, this is strange. It felt kind of normal, but I realize now how unique it is that this community as a church, obviously, again, it's very vibrant on the church, the faith side, but it is vibrant culturally, and part of the reason for that is that there are people still moving here and coming and settling here from overseas directly, and so there is probably a much higher proportion of first generation kids still here than in a lot of other places. So that has driven things in a different way, and also allows for, when we're teaching music, especially in singing, it allows for a little bit more of there's a depth of understanding that comes along with that when you have more native speaking students. Second part, what's
one thing maybe you notice now that has evolved?
That has evolved. So I think when this is super, what's evolved is the appreciation for it. because I think early on I had it in my head that I wanted things to be, to be a certain way, and I wanted the understanding to be different because I understood how, just because of my experiences, how much there was to learn. We talked about the curriculum and touching on all of these different things, and I think I was younger then and probably a little more hard-headed too, and I think I took it personally sometimes when people were like, well, why are we spending so much time on this, or why do we need to work on the costumes in this way? And so now I think people don't ask those questions in the same way anymore. I think there's just such a buy-in as a community because people understand now the depth of what it means and just the layers of it that come along with it. So it is just, it's a very supportive place. It always was, but now much more so, and with deeper understanding.
Sure. So as a wife, as a mother, as a teacher, someone who wears a lot of different hats, being a parishioner here at Holy Trinity, what's one thing that maybe you personally are grateful for about this community of Holy Trinity?
So many things.
I mean,
yesterday we said goodbye to Miss Karras, and so I'll get emotional now thinking about it. I was just saying on the way out yesterday that you said you weren't going to Barbara Walters me, and you made me cry. Just thinking about that whole generation of people who, now I've been here long enough to have been mentored in and to establish relationships with so many people that just gave me love without really knowing me very well, and so I'm just grateful to have been brought in that way and loved, and for my children to be loved in the way they are, and for them just to feel so entrenched here. It's priceless, honestly. You can't express how much that means now and how much it will mean to our family, for a long, long time. So I'm grateful to that generation of women who showed that love and that hospitality, and would definitely want to pay that forward.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
Absolutely. So as you prepare to send Katerina off to college next year, and as you're preparing emotionally and mentally for what that looks like, as an Orthodox parent, because I think that dynamic is interesting, what would your advice be to maybe other parents who are getting ready to send their kid off, or maybe parents of juniors who you're getting to that point, to ensure that they're going to obviously make as wise decisions as they can, but also in your own way ensure that the faith and even the culture is still going to be part of their life, like it was for you when you went off to Charlottesville?
It's such a good question, and of course, so Katerina will be going away far. She's going to be living in Philadelphia, so not in a place where I thought that I had a connection, but that I've already looked this up. So listen to this story. So I looked up of course, Philadelphia being a big city has many Greek churches, but one of the closest churches, I was in the parking lot of a basketball tournament. Where were we? I think we were in Atlanta. It might have been, Winter Youth Rally. And yes, it was, because she had just, December 2019, she just had found out that that's where she was going to be going. And I was sitting in the parking lot waiting for a game to start, and just was looking up on my phone, the churches in Philadelphia. And you can ask Dean, because he was sitting there with me. I burst into tears, because when I looked up one of the closest churches, the priest at that church was one of the first people who ever taught me Greek dance. So he's now Father Anastasios, but back then he was Tassos to us. Yeah. He was a youth director at a parish in Richmond, which was close to our church, and he helped prepare our group for FDF many, many years ago. And now he's the priest there, and I'm thinking to myself, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And so he's on my list to reach out to. I haven't yet. I was waiting for everything to be very finalized. And I also have, through connections, have met another person who lives in Philly who runs a dance program up there. And so, looking for those connections. We're also fortunate we have a couple of family members that aren't terribly far. I think we're just, as Greeks, you're going to find a network. It's just a matter of putting yourself out there. And, she can walk to church if she wants to. And I'll encourage her to do that. And I think it's going to be important to her.
Yeah. I think that's great advice to put yourself out there. Because if you do, like you said, the degree of separation, not just Orthodox, but for Greeks, is not that much. And even, we had Sarah Vastus on the show a few months ago, and she talked about, moving and really not knowing anyone in her new community. And all she did was find something that she was interested in the church, and she became entrenched so quickly. So when you have connections, like your daughter will, I know it was a blessing for me to help matriculate when I first began college. Even if I had never met that person, knowing that we had mutual friends or we had, kumbari that were related or something of that matter, that can definitely make that bridge a little longer as we're trying to cross that bridge into the next phase of our life, so we're not just stepping out into the water with nothing to provide that foundation. And I'm sure as a parent, you've got to be relieved that you've got that connection because
for sure, it's it's a hard time in your life. There's so many changes you're exposed to, just, and it's wonderful. It's an invaluable experience, and you need to have it. It's just, it can sometimes be a hard time in your life to feel grounded and to remember who you are and the foundation that you grew up with. And so to have that, not oversight so much as just a little bit of accountability and just like a pull to remind you like where you're grounded. And I think, as much as we can offer that support to our kids during those years, and in the metropolis and the archdiocese as a whole, we talk a lot about the loss of that age group, and it's you can understand why it happens. So as much as we can do to keep them close, we do our best.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble if you don't mention your boys. They might give me some beef. If there's anything you want.
Oh, we said Yanni for sure. We did see. Well, you've taught Yanni for a long time, and who's now maybe taller than you too, but he's definitely taller than Dean. And so Yanni's, and he's going to be a junior next year, and I imagine be thinking about school soon too. And then Taki, my little one, who's going to be bigger too pretty soon. They're all involved. And Taki was an interesting case, actually, because Taki, we remind him all the time, he cried and did not want to dance as a kindergartner in the festival. And I actually let it go. Dean is, I think, shocked to this day that I let it go, but I'm like, I'm not going to make him hate it, and now he looks back, he's like, I can't believe I didn't. He was just a little bit different then, and now he's, loves the front of the line, so. But
to say the least.
But they were in altar this morning. They love this place. It's home for them.
Yeah. So going off of that thought, and this will be my last question for you. Mm-hmm. If someone is interested about becoming a member here at Holy Trinity, whether they're in Charlotte and they're Orthodox and they need a home, or they're not Orthodox and they're looking for, a new faith tradition, or someone might be coming from outside of the city. If you had to describe the community here at 600 East Boulevard at Holy Trinity in one line, what would you say?
Let me formulate this.
Unfortunately, we don't have commercial breaks, so.
I think I would tell anyone that Holy Trinity is a vibrant, active, loving place. It's a place to find support. It's a place to find joy, and it's a place to learn, quite frankly, about Orthodoxy, but also about yourself. And I think there's a lot of support in all those categories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that one line?
Yeah, it was.
I did a good job.
Stacie, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you,
and thank you for all you do at Holy Trinity and making Holy Trinity what it is. We have so many wonderful volunteers and people who give so much of their time, their knowledge, and their hearts to so many of our programs and ministries. And I know, like we said before, Holy Trinity is better because of what you and your team have offered through the arts and the love of dance. So thank you for that.
That's kind, John. Thank you. And you fall into that category as well. So thanks for having me. It's been fun.
And thank you all for joining us for another wonderful episode of The Ark. Be sure to tune in next month as we learn the stories of, yet again, another wonderful person that makes up the Ark here at Holy Trinity. Until then, be safe and be well. Thank you.